Hello and welcome, MechWarriors, to another exciting, essential edition of Tuesday ranting futilely about the latest PTS. So, if you're not up to speed, go and get up to speed. Things I like about the skill tree. It looks pretty good. It looks nice. It's got to be said. It's functional. I like it. I think it's a really good framework for an improved skill tree. And they tried. That's good. Okay, great. Before I begin actually discussing the problems I find with the skill tree, I'll just mention that the PTS is 4v4 instead of 12v12. And there are no rewards for playing on the PTS. This is something I mentioned in my video about the previous PTS. It means fewer people will play, meaning there's going to be less feedback, and because it's 4v4, it doesn't give you a very accurate impression of how gameplay will be when it drops on the live server. That's not as big a problem this time around, though. Energy draw was affecting the fundamentals of how the game plays, so it was absolutely essential that we saw data from 12 versus 12 players here. Screw it, they can get away with it, but I'm not best pleased that they've stuck the course on that. So let's talk about their actual goals, what they actually want to achieve from the skill tree. We'll talk about that first before we talk about what we as players probably want from it in addition. Empower players with the ability to customize their mech's performance characteristics according to their own desires and goals. It sort of achieves that. Yeah, I'll give them that. I think it has achieved that, although this very delightful, snarky comment by Stormfrog, I'm just going to bring it up. Yes, it's not exactly empowering customization here when you're absolutely forced to take the 40% full damage quirk. Never mind. Okay. Promote greater build and mech diversity on the battlefield by enabling broader control over specialized roles. No, it does not achieve this at all. I'm sorry, this is absolutely not the case whatsoever. Yes, I can now quirk my mech to use a weapon system that the basic quirks don't necessarily allow it to use. Well, not allow, but yeah, okay, I can customize my mech, but the problem is, now that I've customized my mech, if I want to re-customize it, I have to spend 9 million... No, I have to spend like 11 million C-bills respecking it.
Lies. Oh, lies!
Go back. Right. Retract that statement. If I want to respec a mech so that it can use a different weapon type than what I've spec'd it to, it's going to cost me almost 2.5 million C-bills. But that doesn't encourage build diversity. That means I'm going to go, right, this is now my PPC boat mech. I'm never touching it again. I'm never going to rebuild it, because it's going to cost me 2.5 million C-bills to do it. I mean, good lord, the cost of taking ferrofibrous or endo steel off and putting it back on again when you change the mech build is high enough as it is. It does not encourage diversity at all. The next goal, transition from a variant-wide skill tree to an individual mech skill tree, allowing for duplicate versions of the same variant to serve different roles with different skill configurations. Yes, that does tie into what I've just said about the respec costs. The respec costs are sufficiently high that instead of rebuilding my Banshee 3M from a pulse boat to a ER large laser boat, instead of doing that, I'd be very tempted to just buy another Banshee 3M. I mean, I understand they've got to work with microtransactions here and, you know, encourage us to have C-build sinks, but that's I think that's a really smarmy way of putting it. Uh, it takes the fun out of one of the best aspects of the game, which is rebuilding your mech and experimenting with it. Now if I build a mech and go, oh, you know what, actually, I don't like the UAC 5s on this, I want the AC 5s on this Innisphere mech instead.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Well, tough titties! You have to spend 2.5 million reskilling it. That's not okay! Facilitate a drastic reduction of inherent mech quirks. No, it does not facilitate a drastic reduction of inherent mech quirks. If you give every mech in the game the same skill tree, and the same number of points to pick and choose from that skill tree, then you have buffed all mechs in the game equally. I would argue that a 10% buff to an excellent mech is a bigger change than a 10% buff to a rubbish mech. But even ignoring that, you've moved for you've just increased the power of everything. This does not in any way justify taking away offensive quirks from some of the least capable Innisphere mechs. It doesn't facilitate this at all. Oh. So, in my opinion, it doesn't meet PGI's design goals for this system. I'll discuss fixes later on, but first I'd like to go on to what we as players want out of this system, which it's not delivering on. This is not supposed to be a fix for boating, but it makes boating worse, which is not okay. This is a Splat Dog. It is a beautiful mech. If you have not been converted to the gospel, then you need to be. Single weapon boating works incredibly well, primarily because it makes it easier for the mech to pilot. You've only got one weapon system to worry about. It frees up more brain power for the other things. But now this skill system explicitly encourages fitting one weapon type to your mech. What am I talking about, you ask? Well, simply look at the tree. If I have lasers on this as well as SRMs, then if I want them to be quirked, I have to spend points on the appropriate weapon tree. Those are points that could be spent on survival, mobility, operations, yada yada yada. The way it is at the moment, with the number of points we have, I can very easily unlock all of the SRM skills, all of the survival skills, a lot of the mobility, a lot of the operations, and a very big, basically the entirety of the useful part of the operations tree. The infotech tree even. It's insane! This thing has full radar deprivation, seismic sensor, target info gathering, 360 target retention, in addition to incredible, just look at this quirk list, absolutely incredible mobility quirks. We've got, I can't even find it because the quirk list is so long. Where's the right, where is it? Yeah, 90% acceleration, 80% deceleration. It's brilliant. With basically no drawbacks. I mean, it's not like the Mad Dog is overpowered, so it's not really going to cause a huge problem. And of course, other mechs have access to this same tree, but most other mechs rely on at least two types of weapons. Let's take a look at a competing Innisphere mech. Obviously, the Griffin is going to be affected as positively as the Mad Dog, because it owns a classic SRM Brawler Griffin. Only uses... list, please. Yeah, your classic SRM Brawler Griffin only uses the one weapon type, so it's going to play into this boating advantage just as well. But let's say I want to run a... Here you go. Centurion with SRMs and autocannons. Or maybe even the classic Centurion build with autocannons, lasers, and SRMs. Well, that's 2 or 3 different paths on the skill tree I have to unlock for this thing to be competitive with a single weapon boat mech. You take this to the most extreme example possible, and the Kodiak. Just slap autocannons on it. Just unlock all the autocannon quirks, and you've got room for half the mobility quirks, all the survival quirks, pretty much all the operations and a healthy chunk of the infotech tree. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. Another thing that's really, really, really upsetting people is the whale tax aspect of this.
The birds! He rises!
Ross is claiming that this gives us roughly the same amount of grind as the previous system. This is categorically not true. This is absolutely not true. 9 million C-bills. In terms of C-bill cost, when you look at the modules, maybe I can see where he's coming from. I think he's working that out based on the fact that now you only need to buy one mech in order to master it. So he's basically gone. He's looking at the cost of one mech in this new skill tree system versus 3 mechs under the old system, which is not a fair comparison at all. I've got plenty of friends, fellow whales, who have like 150 odd mechs, and even though they've calculated they're going to be rebated like 140 million C-bills from modules, they're still looking at a shortfall of 500 million C-bills to master all of the mechs they have already mastered. And that doesn't even necessarily take into account the XP points. Arctic Cheetahs, I've owned 3 of them, I've elited all 3, I've mastered one of them, I've got a lot of experience points with Arctic Cheetahs. I did not have enough experience points to master just the one Arctic Cheetah chassis. I had to dip into GXP to do it. This is going to be a brutal grind for people trying to remaster their mechs, and it's going to be a brutal grind for new players. New players coming into the game, you buy your first mech, well, good luck, because it doesn't have any quirks. Yeah, it's got the basic default quirks, but it doesn't have these super powered quirks that everybody else is going to be running around with. Another really good example of how this kills build diversity. Here's my Arctic Cheetah. Ordinarily, this Arctic Cheetah, I run it with 2 ER mediums at the shoulders and 4 small pulse. That's different from the usual 6 small pulse build that most people run, which I absolutely agree is generally a more effective build. But hey, I like this build. It's fun. It's fun. It lets me poke and annoy people at 400 meters, and it's still got a crap ton of firepower in close range. It's a good giggle. But if I want to run that effectively, I now have to unlock the pulse laser tree and the laser tree, which is points that I could spend on, you know, things that make it a good light mech. Like these absolutely absurd structure and armor quirks that light mechs get now, which I'm not complaining about, but I don't think it needs to be part of the skill tree system. If you want to buff light mechs, just give them more structure and armor. Done! So, yeah, what this skill tree system is doing is basically saying, no, don't put medium lasers and small pulses on your mech, just pick one weapon type and stick with it. It's not helpful. The other problem with the skill tree system is it's just not interesting. It's more interesting than the old one, of course, but watching paint dry is a bit more interesting than that. It offers me no real choices. Yes, I have choices about which trees I want to spend my points on. So even with this tree, where I've only had to put 19 points into weapons because I'm using just one weapon type, I've had to sacrifice on mobility, and I haven't had enough points to dip into the UAV tree. So yes, there are decisions. Do I want to increase my mobility and my structure, or do I want to make my UAV stay up for longer? Well, that's an absolute no-brainer. The skill tree should have been based off of trade-offs. Instead of what we have now, it should be things like, do I want increased leg structure, or do I want increased acceleration? Do I want extra heat capacity, or do I want a bit of extra structure? By trade-offs, I mean you have to choose between 2 branching paths that are mutually exclusive. You either choose an acceleration quirk, or you choose a leg structure quirk. You could even take it to an extreme, where you have to choose between the heat containment branch and the cool run branch. Do I choose to make my mech a high burst mech? It's got a very high heat capacity, so it can stay in the fight for a bit longer. Or do I want it to run cooler, have a faster cooldown rate, so it has a higher DPS through a brawl? Yeah, these are interesting decisions. Or with the autocannon tree, do I want a UAC jam chance reduction, or do I want a UAC cooldown? There's nothing interesting about this apart from, well, I'm just going to buff the weapons that are on my mech, and I'm going to unlock the entire tree, because I can. Another thing that needs to be done is more powerful mechs need to be given fewer points to spend. The Kodiak doesn't need 91 skill points. You could probably give it 30, and it would end up being relatively on par with other mechs. The potential hang-up here is PGI might look at that idea and go, oh, well, that means it will only take 3 million C-bills to master the Kodiak. We don't want that. And I hope they don't think that, because the very obvious solution is to increase the cost of those individual skill points to normalise it so each mech costs the same to master. Preferably less than 9 million C-bills, but anyway. The big problem with this is this shouldn't be done to get around the problem with this encouraging boating. I will be very, very upset if it's decided that because the Mad Dog is very good at boating SRMs, the Mad Dog should be given fewer points on that basis. No, don't balance around the best build for a mech. If you do that, then it means that the Mad Dog will even further be pigeonholed into boating. It means builds that mix lasers and missiles, or even ballistics if you actually want to put a ballistic on your Mad Dog, they'll be completely gipped, simply because they have the misfortune of sharing a chassis with the Splat Dog. So there needs to be a separate fix for boating, and I think my branching tree idea, the idea of mutually exclusive skills, is one way of doing that. Additionally, unlocking points in the ballistic tree should not prevent you from unlocking points in the laser or missile tree. There should be a separate count of skill points available for each tree. A lot of other people have also suggested making skill nodes diminishing returns. So the first cooldown node I unlock gives me 5%, the second one 3, the third 2, and so on. So it's a lot more viable to dip in and out of trees, and a lot more viable to combine 2 trees for 2 different weapon types. Yep, I think that's a very good idea, but I think on its own, if that's the only change made to the tree, it won't be enough to fix the boating problem, and it won't be enough to make this interesting and a frankly valuable addition to the game. I mean, look at how trees are done in other games. I mean, sorry, I'm going over to World of Warcraft here. I don't have a huge amount of experience with games with talent trees over the last couple of years, but this is an industry leader in game design, and the way it works is you simply pick one from each tier, just one from each tier. You have to make these big sweeping decisions. You can't dip in and out and pick just the best skills that you want. You're forced to make these difficult decisions. I think that's just the problem with this tree. It's just not compelling. But it's a start. If PGI weren't saying that they're going to be dropping us on a live server within 2.5 weeks, I wouldn't be terrified. I would be saying, this is a good start, there's a lot of room for improvement, and there needs to be improvement, but right now I think beyond a complete redesign, incorporating actual decisions and trade-offs, what needs to happen is the grindiness needs to be removed. It needs to be a lot easier for new players to be able to jump straight in and unlock the most powerful abilities in the tree. This is where I do agree with Diminishing Returns. I think mastering it compared to getting half the tree done shouldn't provide a huge bonus. And yeah, it's not impossible to save this, but I really hate to say it. I'm looking in my magic crystal ball, and I am seeing PGI ditching this before putting it on live and just giving up. Because I don't think they're going to implement changes, very sensible and simple changes that people are going to suggest over the next week or two. I think they're going to be very steadfast with sticking to their vision, even though their vision is not being well received by people. And it's a big shame. I want to be proven wrong. I absolutely do. And I'd love to be proven wrong. With the right changes, this could be a good addition to the game, but as it is, if you drop it on live, it is going to force a hell of a lot of people out of the game. And that just is not a sensible move at all.